We're going to kick off now with our second panel of the day. This is exploring offbeat whites, alternative varietals, and expressions. And that was something that we really wanted to highlight. You know, part of the conversation at Sip and Sabor Festival that I've been hearing over the last couple of days is who's doing something new, who's getting creative, what are the incoming consumers, new consumers really curious about, to taste, to enjoy. And I think white wine is having a moment, a highlight. Everybody's getting so excited, easier to drink as we think about wellness as well, a lot of times lower in alcohol. Plus, like we were talking about the marketing, natty wines, all those things, but I think people are also curious to try something different, and whether that's a varietal they've never heard of or just a style and an expression of how something's made. And these three individuals are super badass, and they're also doing that. And so we thought, why not go ahead and have a little fun? And it is called Sip and Sabor, so we might as well be drinking while we're up here enjoying each other's company. First, I'm going to introduce Elena Rodriguez. She is a winemaker and founder of Alumbra Cellars out of Oregon. So we got Oregon in the house. And then we have Susie Vasquez from Lang Twins. Oh my gosh, my voice. And Susie comes from Lodi, a region that is often thought of as like mass production and doesn't get the credit that it deserves, but is making serious wines. And then, of course, a personal favorite human of mine, Gustavo Sotelo, with his label, Oriche Sotelo. You also have a couple of other wines from some folks who we love and appreciate and just couldn't be here today. So also coming from Oregon, Cristina Gonzalez. This is her white Malbec. Clearly, even if you try to get the skins out as quickly as you can, there's still a little bit of pink that comes with that because Malbec is going to pack a punch in terms of its color. We also have an incredible brand, Fire Tree Vineyards. They are an awesome partner, sponsor, supporter, even better family. And the Chardonnay that they're making is absolutely brilliant and delicious. And then we also have Pine Ridge, blending a little bit of Chenin with Chenin and Viognier. So we're really excited to taste through this lineup. Let's see, I was like, how do we want to do this? Do we want to drink a little bit first to calm the nerves while we're up on stage? No, I'm just kidding. We'll go from right to left, and so I guess we'll kick it off with Oriche Sotelo. Gustavo, what can you tell us about this wine?
Yeah, thank you, Gabby. Thanks for allowing me to present this wine to everybody today. I did want to talk a little bit again about just what my experience has been in the market these days in terms of the wines that I make and what I feel is doing well. And as you mentioned, I find that white wines are being really well received by wine consumers. That's still a category that is growing. For reds, I make tempranillos. I started making a mencia as well. But even my distributor in California, I see my white wines being much more well received. So my perception is that consumers are much more open to the idea of trying different varieties, even varieties that they can't pronounce. If you look at the blend for this wine, this comes from a vineyard in Calaveras County called Metate Hill, and the Stange family imported a few of these varieties from Galicia 10 plus years ago. So it's a blend of Albarino, Godello, and another Galician variety called Treixadura. Most consumers are not going to be able to pronounce that, but it hasn't been a problem for me in terms of being able to sell this wine. On the labels, I don't really try to list the varieties because, again, they're so hard to pronounce. And so what I've instead tried to do is create mini brands within each bottling. So this bottling, I call it Albor. And this is where I get into like the marketing of how I like to pitch the wine, talking more about the brand, the name. Albor is a word in Spanish that means first light. And being that this is the vineyard that I work with that is furthest east, it's also the first vineyard in California that I work with that receives light. So I try to tell this story. And also Albor is the origin word as well for Albarino. Albarino is a white grape, obviously. And initially people thought that the word Albarino meant that it might be connected to the Rhino River in Germany. So they were like, is it maybe any genetic connection to Riesling? It's not. It's very native to Galicia. And my last name, Sotelo, has Galician origin. So I really try to focus on those Galician varieties. The blend that I do is basically what I get from the vineyard, so it changes slightly every year in terms of the percentages. The wine's all fermented in 600-liter neutral puncheons. I go directly from press into the barrels. I really like to use the lees, heavy lees in my wines to give it a lot of that salinity. For some of you guys that came to taste at my table yesterday, I was really trying to accentuate that for the other white wine that I poured, Nebula, and my Rosé and Flor. I feel like salty and savoriness is such an interesting element to try to craft into white wines, because to me, it just makes me it makes me even more thirsty, and it makes the wines pair really well with food, especially Mexican food. Some Mexican foods, obviously, like mole, maybe a little bit hard to pair with wine, but all the seafood that we create, all the ceviche, all these white wines do so well with it.
Don't make me hungry now.
And then, again, I was mentioning yesterday the color palette for the brand. So for this bottling, we decided to choose this blue. If you've ever been to Mexico City, I'm originally from the neighborhood of Coyoacán, which is on the south side of the city. And there's a very famous artist known Frida Kahlo, who used to live there. And if you visited her home there, it's a beautiful blue. Everybody knows it. Americans are traveling again to Mexico City like crazy. And all I just have to say is, like, have you been to the Frida Kahlo house? I'm like, that's the inspiration for this wine. And you just start immediately making connections of stuff that they were already interested in. They don't have to remember how the wine was made or what the varieties were. I just call it Blanco in front. But then they're like, oh yeah, I had that white wine from this guy and he said Frida Kahlo and I remember the word albor. And then hopefully they'll see it at a restaurant and be like, oh my God, I love that wine. And they'll try it again.
I love that you touched on that, because I think part of the other thing that we were talking about yesterday with you is, how do you even approach educating a consumer about your wine or grapes that they're completely unfamiliar with, or even like how they're being aged, or just all the different complexities that sometimes come with the world of winemaking, and certainly the technical side. So I love that your approach has very much been about other things that we can actually connect to as humans, like art or like visual storytelling. If you ever go to an actual location and you've traveled and you immerse yourself in that, and that's how you end up having that tie and that connection to that. What does your approach look like for your own brands because I know yours also says white blend on it as opposed to listing out what it is. Do you find that not calling out the grape varietal gives it a little bit more of an approach to consumer who maybe won't understand the technicalities of what's in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of hearing from yesterday's panel, I always make food to be the first part of like my wine when I start talking about it and sharing it. So with this wine, the way I introduce it, Alumbra has always been very untraditional in the way I talk about my wines and share my wines. And I usually say, you can pair this with a really good mole amarillo. And people will remember that, So that's kind of what I start. Very rarely do I get into like, this is a Oregon white Pinot blended with a Pinot Gris and the percentage and the technicalities of it. So yes, usually I just say it's a white blend. There are some consumers that get really curious with it. But a lot of the times my consumers that I see typically with that come through Alumbra just love that I really talk and share about Mexican food pairings. That's been something that I've really been highlighting with my wines. But then I do also, because as a winemaker, I'm like, this is a blend of this, and I'll just kind of throw that in there. And some people will be like, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that blend, and which is something that I have really tried to focus on and making blends that are unique and different, just trying to stand out in that Oregon wine market that is challenging. So
yeah, yes. The entire wine market that's challenging. Susie, especially Lodi, we can get a little taste of yours. Talk to me a little bit about Chenin. Obviously, not one of the most popular grape varietals. When we think about white wine, right, especially consumers, I think the obvious ones are going to be Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, but we're seeing more excitement on other grape varieties growing. Chenin is really popular in Lodi, and so I would just like to say, like, why did you choose to focus on Chenin, and what does that expression really look like for you?
So for us, Chenin is, you're absolutely right, it's a back blender for Chardonnay. And it works beautiful for Chardonnay. So this 2023 is the second harvest of this vineyard in Clarksburg. So we went and every year when we're gonna harvest, we go and taste the grapes, and we're like seeing the evolution for the bricks, the sugars, and we are deciding, okay, when do we want to harvest this? And when we went back to the vineyard, like, this is outstanding. It's delicious. It's showing such a great personality of the varietal. So when we decided, okay, we're gonna harvest this at between 19 to 20 bricks because we wanna show the personality, and in a lower alcohol, high acidity, what we're trying to do is not change too much the juice of what we are harvesting is what we wanna put in a bottle. So when we're harvesting, we're trying not to acidulate, we're trying not to add water, not change anything. So when we decided it's time to harvest, we decide, 2 days before or the day before, and we're like, this is ready. The trucks needs to come, and all our vineyards are, the farthest is probably some of these vineyards, they're like 30 minutes. So the trucking time is not long. Mm-hmm. We don't receive in bins, we receive in trucks. So we are make sure that we are protecting the fruit when it's coming to the winery. So that time on the truck for us is important, right? For a little bit of oxidation, so the color. We brought it and we taste the juice again and decided the fermentation time, and we're like, this is beautiful. We're gonna put this in a bottle, and we move it into barrels. So this Chenin is barrel fermented. It did not went through malolactic fermentation. It only went to the primary fermentation. And so this is what you do, right? As a winemaker, you go and these juices that we're fermenting we taste them every day. So just for the same reason, nutrition or anything that it can be missing. And we were so excited when we finished fermentation. We just let it sit on, this is in neutral barrels, obviously, and it just stayed in barrels for 3 months. We did not touch it one time that it finished the fermentation. We let it be. We just went to just sample once a month to make sure everything was okay, and then we brought it and we bottled it. It's 99% Chenin and it's 1% of Pitbull Blanc. We just add the Pitbull Blanc because it had just added a little note of citrus in it that we really liked it, right? A lot of the wines that we're bottling, they are between 95 to 100% varietal. Because what we want people is to remember that, so if they're not seeing the label or looking at what varietal it is, at least when they grab a glass of wine, they're like, well, this is delicious. What is this? Mm-hmm. And that's how the name starts coming part of this. We have 36 different varietals of Vitis vinifera that we're growing in Lodi and in Clarksburg. A lot of whites. We're seeing also that there is a big, more people is open to try whites. Might be by the tannins, might be the alcohol, but we're seeing that. And we have all these different varietals that they're whites that we're learning as well, that we're falling in love, and we're gonna start trying to fermented, experiment a little bit in the stainless steel barrels. But we're seeing some of these wines that for us are like, this is beautiful, we want to share it. Mm-hmm.
How are you choosing which varieties then to go after? If you said you sound like you have a couple of surprises coming up along the way.
Yes, I'm very excited about some of the varietals that we are having. Some of them are their first or year or second, so we're trying to see, at the beginning, like the new grapes are like so vigorous, they're so excited. So we don't know yet the personalities, so we have to wait a couple of years to see, okay, what is this gonna be, right? So it's by tasting. You go and it tastes so many times when the fruit is ripening, and you go and keep tasting on the vineyards. We go really early in the morning, so we taste it, around 6, and we are trying to see, one of the things that we do as a winemakers too is you try to project, right? And the fermentation, what is going to be the ending result. And you're already kind of planning, this is going to be dry, this is going to be, the acidity will be beautiful. And you're absolutely right. We're looking to people to pair these with, for food. It's the complement of food. We want it to be on your table. We want you to share it with friends. We want it to be, part of the, their beautiful life. That's what we want to do. And that's how we kind of try to see in the future what is going to be. So, for example, I love wine, and I drink a lot of wine. And so at the same time, I cannot, have 3 glasses of wine anymore and feel like the next morning I can go and have a meeting. So, but I discovered that drinking white wines, that the alcohol is between 11 to 12.5%, I can have, 3 glasses of it and be really good the next morning. I mean, nothing happened. I'm more efficient. But it is also creating these wines for me, right? Or the people that identify like me, that you cannot drink that much, but you love enjoying a glass of wine after a good day of work, and you come and you just want to sit down and start cooking, and you want to enjoy a delicious glass of wine, and that's what we want to do.
Absolutamente, me encanta. Raise show of hands if you've heard of pick pool before. Okay, a good amount. What? Did I mispronounce it? Pick pool. Pick pool.
I think you're saying pit bull.
Oh, pig pool. We'll blame it on my voice going out. Can you share a little bit more about? I mean, I saw a lot of hands, but you said 1%. So, any plans to maybe go heavier and lean into creating a wine that's maybe more dominant?
We're planning to have a pig pool blanc as a varietal. We are seeing there is other amazing wineries in Lodi. I want to let you know, like, Lodi, it's an incredible place. I know, of course, Napa and Sonoma, they're beautiful, absolutely. Lodi produces the majority of the fruit. So we produce more than Napa and Sonoma together, plus 30% of fruit. That's what we produce, right? And we have over 120 different varietals. How lucky we got, I'll explain it to you. So a long time ago, UC Davis and Nick Kuslian, that is currently working at Gallo, he used to work for UC Davis, they decided that they wanted to trial different varietals that they will bring to California and see how they will use it from different regions of the world, but they were not the ones that people was putting on their pants, on their pockets, right? From other countries. They were like bringing them, going through UC Davis, cleaning them, so it was any problems with them, and then planting them in Lodi. Lodi because of the weather. So they wanted them as back blenders. They were never planning on having them as their own varietals, right? So Gallo was investing to have more, like you're in the kitchen and you have more spices to make. So what can they create to elevate their wines? So this was what they were doing. And I came as an exchange student, and then I started working for Gallo and the viticulture group. My background, soy ingeniero agrónomo. Entonces, cuando I started working really on the vineyard, what I love. My passion started there, and then I fell in love with wine. It was just a transition. I was very lucky, really. So then we will go and clip some of these vines to wait and see how much they will produce. And then and these people doing these experiments, they brought all these different varietals to Lodi. And now that the times have changed, and before Lodi was just producing fruit, so Gallo, Constellation, all these big wineries will buy the fruit, right? So they were big producers. They were trying to get a lot of tons per acre because they were making money on selling the grapes. But then when market wasn't good and the big wineries were saying, well, this year we're only going to pay you 300, and they were like, oh my God, I can't even pay for anything that I invested. So they decided, we're going to start wineries and we're going to sell the wine in bulk. That's how it started. And then later, they developed to, hey, we actually can make great wines. So the whole mentality of producing big volumes, it changed. Now they're looking for a balance. We're looking for a balance, right? In the grapes and the ratio, how we're growing, and looking all this to produce these wines. So if in a region that we have weather of 105 some of the summers for over a week, we can make a Chenin Blanc that we didn't acidulate, and it has an acid of 3.3. We're proving the difference, right? We're saying, look, we can make wonderful wines that are going to come from Lodi. And we have all these different varietals, and our rack spice is huge. And we can make all these things for you. Of course, our red varietals are not, the intensity of some of our wines are different, but this is the region. We're representing Lodi and who we are. And now there is a big effort with great winemakers, Anaya Wines, that we are trying to show that, hey, look at these wines, right? These are wines that the AVA is Lodi, and in Lodi we have 7 different sub-AVAs. And it's all about the ground. It's all about, so we are also with time discovering what varietals grow better in what different sub-AVAs. We are evolving, right? It was like, if you think about 100 years old, Lodi never planted Cabernet Sauvignon. Nobody will think about it. But then Robert Mondavi, that if you guys don't know, he went in school in Lodi, actually. He make a contract with Lane Twins. They were the first one that they decided, hey, let's plant Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's funny, when you hear the story from the twins, the brothers, they tell you that they will take the wine and the Mondavis will be like, no. And they had to learn how to really grow Cabernet Sauvignon in that area. So you have to learn different ways today you have to grow the grapes, because it's not the same as in Napa, right? The weather, also Sonoma, the weather is different. But it's a process you have to learn. So I am very happy that I'm working Lodi, and we have this ability in this we can start showing you guys the different spectrum of the wines that we can create.
100%. And you touched a little bit on finding that balance, as well as, the different approachability and creating just something different for the market, whether it was Cabernet at that point. And then now us being able to explore all these different whites. We can go ahead and taste the Pine Ridge. Yesterday, Gustavo was here representing, and so if you had a chance to taste some of Pine Ridge's other wines yesterday, that was awesome. But the question that I wanted to ask all three of you, is how do you walk that balance between I love pushing boundaries, I love breaking barriers. There's also this love and appeal to sometimes staying a little traditional, right? Because it's comforting, it feels like home. But then I also want to slam down the door and be like, what else is different? So how do you walk that line between innovation, tradition, how to find that balance in your brand, as well as for consumers, because at the end of the day, you can make some really great wine. How are you going to get somebody to enjoy it and actually drink it and want to seek it out?
I tend to lean on my love and interest for Spanish wine. And I got the opportunity to work in Spain in 2014, and still have a lot of friends in the industry over there. And so I follow what the Spanish industry does. And similar to Italy, there are hundreds of native grape varieties in Spain. And they also have these different styles of wine that are centuries old. And people love Spanish wine, and they know a lot about these styles, but for whatever reason, in the California wine industry, some of those styles haven't been adopted. So like yesterday, I was pouring the white wine Nebola, which is inspired by the region in Chacolí, which is in Basque Country in Spain. America loves Chacolí. And it is a very simple, easy drinking white wine, lower in acid, higher in acid, lower in alcohol, bottled with a slight spritz, mostly stainless steel. And in País Vasco, they literally harvest, ferment in September, start bottling in November. So if you talk about cash flow and being able to start selling that wine right away, I mean, that's a slam dunk for business owners and winemakers. And what I had discovered is that style of wine was not being made in California. And it's honestly versatile for all different kinds of varieties. Like I even think Chenin with a little bit of spritz would be delicious. Mm-hmm. And the Chacolí varieties don't exist in California, but we do have Alvarinho, we do have Arinto. Those are the varieties that are used in Portugal to make Vinho Verde. So to me, it was just an obvious gap that we had in the market to bring a traditional style of wine in Spain that just isn't here yet. So is it innovative? It's like a yes and a no. It's more like finding what the gaps are, what people like that they just haven't been able to taste in California wine before. And every time I open a bottle of Nebula, I'm like, do you like Chacolí? They're like, yes, you're gonna like this wine. And then they try it and they get transported to the last time they had a bottle of Chacolí with some oysters. And it's been a great sell for me.
Take me to Spain. How about for you, and how do you approach your winemaking style, especially as you also learn to walk that balance between innovation, tradition, pushing those boundaries without alienating maybe some traditionalists?
Yeah, so I kind of came into this with being like, I'm not going to do anything traditional because my dad wasn't, he was an immigrant, and the way we started was very untraditional. Our story is just very untraditional within the wine industry in Oregon. So I just really focused on really being the untraditional winemaker. I didn't have a traditional mentor. My winemaking is very untraditional. I leave a little RS in my, which sometimes it's like, good, no, you don't do that in white wine. You don't leave a little bit residual sugar. It's too sweet. I do that on a lot of my wines, and that's kind of my style. And people love them and drink them, and they sell, which is great. And they pair really well with food. So for me, it's been really trying to explain why I do what I do in my winemaking. It's very untraditional. I don't do the Oregon thing, and I am not a Chardonnay Pinot Noir person, but I have a ton of Pinot Noir to work with. My dad planted Pinot Noir 20 years ago, and so that's why I have a white Pinot Noir blend. That's why I have a Pinot Noir Tempranillo blend. That's why I'm using what I have available to make these unique blends and kind of break the tradition. You know, my red blend is called mitote, which sometimes means scandal, because a lot of people in the Oregon wine are like, oh my God, you're blending Tempranillo with Pinot Noir. I'm like, yes, and it's a great blend. And same thing with this white Pinot. Oh my gosh, you're making a white Pinot Noir. You can make a red and sell it for a lot more. Why are you wasting your fruit on a white wine? And it's like, because it's delicious and it pairs really well. So I'm very much just, my perspective is coming in from a totally different career. This wasn't something that I had planned. And so just when I'm making my wine, I'm not a traditionalist at all. And sometimes it's a struggle to be able to make something that is appealing to that very traditional consumer of like, you don't just have a Pinot Gris, you don't just have a Chardonnay, you don't just have a Sauv Blanc. No, I don't. But I have this that is similar and that you can taste it and they end up loving it. So that tradition for me is just kind of finding my own style, which sometimes is all over the place. But I've only been making wine for Alumbra for 5 years. I haven't been in this industry. I've been farming for 10. My dad has been farming for 20 years. But I never really gave it the attention that I was like thinking that one day I'm going to become a winemaker and have my brand. So I definitely have approached it in a very non-traditional way, and my winemaking kind of shows that as well. I started out in the vineyard, just the same as Susie, helping my dad in the vineyard and taking over the vineyard operations and vineyard management. I spend a lot of my days out there. So this white Pinot Noir, Raimundo and I specifically take care of the fruit, crop it a little bit heavier because I'm not making a red out of it. So I do a Scott Henry trellising system on it to load it up more. I try to retain the acidity of it. I pick it a little bit earlier at like 20.5 bricks and just really make that bone dry. And then the Pinot Gris, lead a little bit of RS in it, and then I blend it. So that's kind of the idea that I have with that. But a lot of it has to do with the farming and tasting the fruit and tasting those flavors in the fruit that you're trying to get. So tradition is hard for me, and sometimes I do get scolded by my boyfriend, who's a very much traditionalist and was trained in a very traditional way in Oregon wine making. So, but I think it's beautiful to share your uniqueness and not be afraid to break the tradition sometimes because there's not that many people doing it.
100%. And I think that's why this panel is so exciting, is how do we actually start then exploring, right? If it's not available to us to enjoy and nobody's choosing to break through that tradition, then it's not going to be out there for people to consume. And we've talked about it multiple times throughout the conference. People are curious. They're looking for something different. They're looking to see like what's possible, trying to see just like how much further you can take it. So that's really exciting. You talked a little bit about style. You clearly are breaking the mold. What challenges do you find with breaking away from tradition?
I constantly have to explain myself, right? And sometimes it gets tiring. I constantly have to explain like my decision making and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think just my consumer, my club membership with Alumbra is 80% Latino. So I just with that, in Oregon, within the industry, when we do trade tastings, my style is so different. And it's like, because my consumer is different than a lot of wineries in Oregon. And my consumer is new to the industry too, and new into the experience of tasting wines. So especially in Oregon. So a lot of the times I don't do a lot of explaining to my consumer, but I do a lot of explaining to the industry trade about it. I'm first a consumer and I'm first a farmer and then a winemaker at the very end. So I make wines that I feel like, there's a lot of Latinas like me that, enjoy wines with mole or whatever, so I kind of try to make those wines that are appealing to me and to my consumer. And so it's just a lot, sometimes tasting notes and the tech sheets and all that kind of stuff is just doing a lot of explaining and sharing in my intention of why, because I'm very intentional on why I'm doing this. And, like planting different varietals on my vineyard too, that I've had to explain my buyer, why are you planting that there? I don't think that's going to work. And I'm like, because I just want to try it, So I sometimes take these risks, and sometimes they're not going to work, sometimes they haven't and they failed, but you learn and you just keep going with it.
You keep exploring. What does that process look like for you as you both break the mold and try to create something new, especially as, the challenges that sometimes come with breaking from tradition?
I feel like we also have a market with young people that are constantly looking for the new thing. Even if you just think about social media and the amount of content that we try to consume, it's always like, what's new, what's exciting? So people are already coming to the table with like, I don't just want to have another oaky Chardonnay or another big alcoholic cab from Napa that I can't even afford. So they're looking for new things. They're looking for new flavor profiles, new textures. So those are the consumers that we're trying to go find, and those are also consumers who are big foodies that want to try the new restaurants that are in town, new foods. There's all this fusion going on with different cuisines as well. So that's where I guess kind of trying to tie back to collaborating or trying to put my wines in other businesses that are doing new and exciting things. There's a synergy there between what they're doing and the new profiles of different kind of wines that we're trying to make.
And that's the intentionality that you talked about, right? Is when you can align yourself with people who like see they see your goal, it all just allows the ethos of that to keep growing and for you to feel like your wine now has intention and purpose in the place that it's in. Susie, for you, especially Link Twins, produces many, many different wines. How do you navigate sort of breaking through that mold sometimes, whether it's with choosing to plant new varieties that maybe haven't been explored before, or blending a wine in a way that, you're interested in pursuing?
So we are traditional in the aspect that the way that their labels look and the bottle, we like that. We like because it looks elegant, and that's what we try to show, right? But in the winemaking, so we're traveling and tasting wines from other parts of the world, and the exciting other wines that people is doing around the world is incredible. So then we bring these varietals with expectation to see how they're going to grow in Lodi, but it's a little bit different, right? The terroir is different, so it's never going to be the same for us. I think we are a little bit in. Remember, I learned how to make wine here in the United States. I was working on the grapes in the vineyard, and I loved it. So we are a little bit adventurous with that. We love to see the process of the fermentation. We love to see where we will see the wine, and that is our target. Our target is a balanced wine that is going to be. It's going to show that if we're putting Chenin Blanc on there, we're going to try to elevate the notes that they are for the Chenin Blanc. If it's a Sauvignon Blanc, we're going to respect the green notes. And so we're also looking for somebody who's going to grab a glass of wine and says, oh, this is Sauvignon Blanc, and I love it, right? So we're looking for that too. But at the same way, I follow my heart. I love winemaking. I love tasting wine. So when I see and I love it, and I can see it, I can project it, and I love it. I said, this is gonna be. It's same with the blending, right? It's what it tastes, and it has the best balance. I never really looked too much, how the old world, they make these wonderful wines, and I love it, and I have a lot of passion for it, but what I try to respect when I look at wines is the wines that we are creating here, or the grapes that we're growing here, that they're going to develop into something. So I'm the same way, a little bit more adventurous and taking risks on that. And yes, sometimes I get the same questions like, why do you blend it with this varietal, right? Doesn't seem that they're going to go, but then you can prove it. And it says, no, it does. Mm-hmm. It does really work. So I think that is the way that I see wine. I see wine as it's something dynamic. Right? It changes because the consumer changes as well. So you have to be able to adapt all the time to all these changes, right? And follow the trend that people is doing. And why not? It's adventurous as well. It's fun. Of course, we're going to make wines that they are the traditional wines for people that are still looking for a Chardonnay that has, a big amount of oak and it has ML, and because they love it. But then we also gonna make wines that they're like, hey, let's make, Chenin that's gonna be very fermented, not ML because we didn't really like it with the ML, and let's make it. What blends? We brought everything, right? We brought all these other whites to blend, and it was just People Blanc. Let's make it with that one, and we fell in love with it.
I love that. And speaking of Chardonnay, we have a beautiful Chardonnay, as I was mentioning, from Fire Tree. Fire Tree, as I mentioned, is a incredible sponsor of the Sip and Sabor Festival. They're new to the, I would say, wine industry, wine growing region as of late in the last couple of years. Beautiful family, originally from Venezuela. And where most people, and yes, we included Chardonnay in a panel that's titled Exploring Offbeat Whites, Alternative Varietals and Expressions. And that is because Chardonnay, as most people, and I think this new generation of wine consumers isn't sometimes looking for that oaky Chardonnay that's, buttery. You want something bright, beautiful for those foods that we're looking to go after. And this to me is that exact Chardonnay expression. It is aged for about 6 months on the lees in stainless steel tanks and concrete eggs. 2 beautiful expressions that you're not going to have that heavy butteriness from any of that oak. Do either of you work with concrete eggs or stainless steel? Talk to me about what that does to the wine and how that really changes things from introducing that oak.
I also make wine for Scribe Winery in Sonoma, and for our entire white wine program there, we use 0 oak. It's all stainless steel or concrete vessels. And 2 years ago, we were able to invest in a bunch of more concrete conicals that are about 1,000 gallons. We use it for our Chardonnay program, and we use it for our German grape varieties, Riesling and Silvaner as well, that we have planted in Sonoma. And when you think about it, concrete is as inert as stainless steel. Some people say that concrete acts like a barrel and you can get some oxygen to transfuse through 2-foot thick concrete walls. If there is oxygen going through, I would assume that wine's also leaking out of those tanks. So it's truly inert, but I think what's interesting about concrete is that it's porous on the inside as well. So when you first fill it, whether it's juice or with wine, there's tiny bubbles of air that get trapped in the walls of the concrete and the juice in the wine, and those bubbles slowly over time end up infusing into the wine. So that's where there is some similarity of barrels in that there is some kind of micro-oxidation that happens. And I don't know scientifically why it is the case, but I always find that the whites that are fermented in concrete do have more of a mineral quality to them. It also helps accentuate some of that salinity too, and like a chalky texture. There's a different texture to it where it's almost like it picks up some tannin. White wines are not supposed to have tannin, but I find that whites fermented in concrete have like a dry extract texture to them.
I'm definitely getting that in this wine, and it's super delicious, especially I'm someone who wants to veer away personally from super oaky Chardonnays because that's just not my jam. But this to me right here just gives us a completely different expression to where you kind of ask yourself, like, what am I drinking here exactly, right? Like if I hadn't shown you the label, because it might throw you off on, is this truly 100% a Chardonnay or is it a blend with something? How does concrete show up in your program when you work with it?
Well, I would love to talk to you more about cement. So I just got a brand new cement tank for a new winery this year. So I decided to throw my rosé in there this year. And it's definitely going to be a completely different style. So I'm going to have to explain that to my consumers because it does give this kind of, just before I came here, I was checking on it and I was, smelling their aromatics, tasting it. And it's this aroma that it was so familiar, but I couldn't really pinpoint it, like what it was. And I was just asking all sorts of questions because I'm a new winemaker and I want to have new vessels and I want to see new, different fermentation vessels and experiment. So it added this beautiful weight to it that I was unexpected, and this earthiness to it that I really enjoyed. So My rosé is going to be a little different. I don't know if you've had my rosé before, but
I haven't, but I know I'm excited to try it.
it's exciting. So, but yeah, it gives it this, it just adds another layer of complexity to it. And it's not just a stainless steel, high acid rosé, beautiful aromas, but this other level added of complexity when tasting it. And I would love to work more with cement and just concrete eggs. I would love to, if anybody wants to fund some for the Luma Cellars wine project.
I love it so much. And I think that there's misconceptions that can sometimes come with Chardonnay, for example. And so when you start to work with something different, you're able to craft a new, beautiful expression to enjoy something that maybe somebody who isn't a traditionalist wouldn't want to enjoy. And it's like, no, I actually am digging Chardonnay because of this new way of actually aging the wine and how you're able to find that expression. What are some of the common misconceptions that you've all had to navigate as it comes with just like the white wine world, right? I mean, when we think about wine, white wine kind of takes a backseat because everybody wants to go for red, but whites are so exciting.
I'll talk about Scribe specifically. We make Riesling and Sylvaner, and still to this day, I think most consumers think of Riesling as just being a sweet white wine. They don't even want to try it. Even wine club members are like, "Oh, the Riesling's coming out. Can I actually swap it out? I don't like sweet Riesling." I'm like, "You've been a wine club member for 6 years. You know that it's like fully dry and like very high acid." And so there is, back in the day, Blue Nun was the Riesling that everybody was familiar with. And it was very sweet. And a lot of, the German categorization of wine is very much based on sugar levels. So it does take still some education and some encouragement of consumers to be like, I know you say that you haven't liked this in the past, but we're a new winery, we're a young winery, young winemakers, trying new things. I promise this will be a very different experience than what you've had before. You kind of have to encourage them a little bit.
Susie?
Yes, I think I totally agree with you. I think you touch a very good point. It's the perception of like a Gewürztraminer, for example. We ferment it and it's dry, but it still has the aromatics, and consumers come and say, no, I don't want anything sweet. And it's, again, just encourage them and say, let's try it. It's dry, with high acidity, will be really refreshing, and you have to make sure that you're adding, and also you're absolutely right, in the whites, the level of the CO2 is important for us to, when we open a bottle and you are elevating the aromatics, and they fell in love first with the aroma. And they're like, oh, I want to try this. This smells so good. And then it opens that door for them to try new things. And we in our tasting room are also doing the same thing, encouraging people to just try. Don't worry. If you don't like it, we understand, right? They're not going to like everything that we make, but at least see if it's something that you will enjoy later. So especially with like Chenin Blancs and other new Pitbull Blanc and other varietals, they're like, what is that? I never heard about that. And then we start like explaining a little bit of the flavors, right? What they're going to find in that. And it is important with these white wines that the nose and then the palate, they will match. So whatever they are smelling will be right there on the mouthfeel, and they find that connection, and then they start trying new things.
100%. And anything you care to add in?
Yeah. So in my space that I have, and when people aren't really willing to try new things, or I always include food. So what I share, I have little trays, and I have little different chicharrones with different flavors, right? And so I'll be like, do you guys like chicharrones, And
the whole room just lit up.
So imagine drinking this white wine over here with a little bit, a chicharron with a little bit of like red chili on it, or, and then taking a drink of that. And they're just like, oh my God, this pairs so well. So I always talk about food. Be like, what do you like to eat? Or do you like ceviche? Or do you like or whatever it is? I'd be like, this wine will pair well with it. So my avenue to that, and introducing like a very unique or this wine that they've never heard of, is I always start talking about food, and I'll pull out my little trays of chicharrones. Because once you eat that, you want to take a drink of something. So I'm like, try this with it. So that's been the way I've been introducing these different varieties. It's just my little different flavors of chicharrones that I've been offering at my tasting space.
Now I want some chicharrones.
I'll start buying them now.
We can go ahead and enjoy our last wine here. This is a wine that comes from Oregon, from Cristina Gonzalez. Absolutely incredible person. Just opened up a co-collaboration called Community Wine Bar in Oregon, so highly recommend you go and visit. But, you know, speaking of just trying new things, we obviously have a white Malbec, little pinky. We like pink. It matches my blazer that was lended to me. What kind of thinking ahead? I mean, what do you think is going to be trending in the future? Like, where is white wine headed, especially as we start to see just this really big shift, both in the industry side of things, as well as like what consumers are asking for? Any varietals that you think are on the horizon that we should keep an eye out for, or even for yourselves that you're curious to explore?
I feel like sparkling wine or different levels of sparkle in wine is going to continue to do really well. I always think about this like non-alcoholic movement, or people that just want to drink less. A lot of the beverages that they're still drinking, their favorites, are like carbonated beverages. A lot of the RTD beverages are also slightly carbonated. People just like a little bit of bubble in whatever liquid they're consuming. So again, you don't have to. It can be pretty expensive to make a traditional style sparkling wine, but people will also be open to having wine that was made in the Charmat method, where it's carbonated in tank and then bottled, or like the white wine I was serving yesterday that's slightly forced carbonated before bottling, and I don't have to use a champagne bottle. It's just a normal bottle with cork. So I think sparkling wine will probably continue to grow, and that's an interesting category for us to explore with all kinds of varieties as well. Again, people seem to be very open-minded about, doesn't matter what the name of the variety is, try it out with a little sparkle. You might create something unique that nobody else is doing.
I love that. Elena?
With my new winery space and my experimenting, it's a good thing and a curse too, because I just start thinking about all these things that I can do. And so this year I made from our vineyard, we planted in 2020 some Pinot Gris, some Chenin, some Cazzarelli, some other just different varieties. And so I made a Chardonnay Pinot Gris blend, Pet Nat, that I released. Just really new. It's really tart and really crisp, and maybe different size bottles. So I put it in a 500 milliliter bottle, something smaller. A lot of people are not drinking very much. It's a lower alcohol. I picked it early, and that thing has just sold. So, so just like bubbles again, like bubbles and a unique blend of Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. Like people don't even, it's just good. And it has a little bit, all native yeast ferment and native fermentation. Like Christina's is a native yeast ferment and barrel fermentation, which is amazing. And so I think maybe moving in that way, and also just different vessel sizes, and not just always this traditional bottle size as well.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really great point, especially the fact that you made that shift already and you've seen it flying off the shelf. I have a trip to Oregon in the near future. I can start to see. Susie, what do you think is going to be kind of on the horizon that we should keep an eye out for?
To me, a varietal that I love and I fermented before in a different winery is Vermentino. I think Vermentino is an amazing white varietal, and people seems to be very receptive to it because of the aromatics, and it's also a back blender for any other wines. It elevates them, and I totally agree that the use of CO2 now in the new whites, it's very important. Sparkling has their own category. Yes, I think that is something that's not gonna go down. It's gonna keep maintaining or going up, because people do, after coming of the culture of drinking sodas or a flavored water, is something that's gonna continue. We enjoy it. I love drinking.
I'm a bubble fiend myself.
Yes, it's delicious, right? So, but if you're making like a Chenin Blanc, a Vermentino, if you play with a little bit of like the CO2 level in your bottles, and then you will see. You just have to find that balance where it won't change on the palate too much. But when people opens that bottle and they start drinking it, and they smell it and taste a little bit of that fizz, it just opens the door. And I think there is something that we are putting a lot more effort to study and see what it will be. Unfortunately, we cannot make traditional method, sparkling or a Charmat. We don't have the tanks to do that. It's different, completely different tanks. But we are in our whites experimenting the level of CO2 to see how people's going to react to it. And we're going to plant Vermentino now because I've been pushing so much. I'm like, Vermentino. So we're going to plant. So maybe here in 40 years, we'll have some Vermentino in our winery.
I am excited. I think we have time for one question from the audience if there are any questions. And if not, we can continue to sip and enjoy our wines. All right. Well, I just want to give a big round of applause to the three of you. Absolutely amazing job.